Forests, the lungs of our planet, absorbing the carbon dioxide in the air and expelling the oxygen we breathe, while providing homes and habitats for our planet's diverse and extraordinary wildlife. However, our forests are disappearing faster than ever before, and they need our help. Deforestation is a global issue all over the world. However, I'm here in Australia, a global deforestation hotspot, with Australia having one of the highest deforestation rates in the developed world, with around 40% of Australia's woodland and forests being destroyed as of 2023, with no sign of slowing down. The forest sector has projected that Australia needs to establish approximately 1 billion trees, which is equivalent to 400,000 hectares of new plantations over the next decade to meet our future demand for wood as Australia's population grows, and with global demand for timber expected to quadruple by 2050. Although Australia is planting 1 billion trees, they are going towards plantations, which, although seems to be good for the environment, is in fact negatively affecting our native wildlife. Plantations are areas of land where a single species of tree is planted and cut down once it is grown. But by only planting a single species of tree, it decreases biodiversity compared to native forests, especially when the trees planted are not native to the area. This biodiversity loss from plantations can be seen all throughout Australia, with many species of native animals suffering from the effects. One of these animals being negatively affected is koalas, as they rely on native eucalyptus trees for food, water, and protection, and with plantations and deforestation taking over their habitats, around 1,200 koalas are killed every year. Unfortunately, koalas aren't the only native animals suffering from deforestation here in Australia, as from 2016 to 2020, 2.4 million hectares of forest and woodland habitats were bulldozed in New South Wales and Queensland, with over 100 million mammals, birds, and reptiles being killed in the process, and this number is only expected to rise in the future. As well as this, the Australian government is spending $18 billion to keep feral cats under control to help protect our native animals. Yet we are destroying the very forests that provide natural protection from these feral animals. As well as native trees, native shrubs and vegetation on the ground is not necessarily protected, as the term shrubby vegetation does not meet the recognised definition of a forest. Therefore, the native fauna that relies on this native low-lying vegetation can be cut down for agriculture. In Australia, the timber industry is a large contributor towards the country's economy, contributing approximately $24 billion annually and supplying Australia with 2/3 of its log supply. The United Nations recognised plantations as a way to balance economic, social, and environmental benefits, which is true. However, too many plantations are being established, taking over native forest land. This can be seen in Australia, with the Australian government spending around $300 million to support our forest industries to innovate and improve their capacity and capability. As a part of this, $73 million of grant funding is being provided through the Support Plantation Establishment Program over 4 years to support the establishment of new long rotation plantation forests. In conclusion, Australia is establishing more and more plantations across Australia to support the economy, leaving little room for native forests and unbalancing the benefits between the economy and the environment. Not only does deforestation destroy and disrupt animals and their habitats, but deforestation is also contributing towards climate change. Since the Industrial Revolution back in the 1800s, the global greenhouse gas emissions rate has never gone down and just keeps increasing, with no sign of slowing down. Forests, however, absorb the carbon dioxide we put in the air and turn it into oxygen through a process called photosynthesis. Yet we continue cutting down billions of trees a year, disrupting forests' natural contribution towards slowing climate change, which humans are working so hard and spending so much money to control. Deforestation contributes to nearly 5 billion tons of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere every year, which is equivalent to nearly 10% of annual human emissions. Australia is a prime example of this, with the federal government heading towards the spending of $1 trillion on renewable energy to lower greenhouse gas emissions. However, they have put little budget into the growth and regeneration of native forests and woodland to support our native wildlife and absorb the carbon emissions we are putting into the air that is increasing the rate of climate change. Although Australia is committed to halting and reversing net forest loss and land degradation by 2030, and Australia's land area increase rate is consistent with the Glasgow Leaders Declaration commitment. Moving on from plantations, agriculture is one of the biggest contributors towards deforestation, with beef responsible for 41% of global deforestation. An estimated 80,000 square miles of forest land is lost every year for meat production, 80% of which occurs in the Amazon, the world's most biologically diverse ecosystem, which is found to emit a greater amount of carbon dioxide than it is absorbing as a result of deforestation and wildfires. Aside from beef production, the palm oil industry is also responsible for a significant amount of deforestation worldwide. Unfortunately today, we are seeing deforestation on a mass global scale, with each year across the globe 15 billion trees are cut down for agriculture, timber harvesting, and urbanization, compared to the struggling reforestation efforts with only 1.8 billion trees being replanted every year. It was just 90 years ago, in the 1930s, where 66% of our planet was covered in wilderness. But since then, the human population has almost quadrupled, and now only 25% of our planet's wilderness remains. And with the ever-increasing human population, things are only going to get worse. With supply for timber and land going to an all-time high, our planet's forests and wildlife will get to a point beyond recovery, and now is the time to act. As Sir David Attenborough said, the longer we leave it, the more difficult it will be to do something about it. But how can we fix this? And is it too late? First, more efforts need to go towards the protection of current and future forests to ensure the safety of forests from deforestation and logging now and in the future. Next, a major reforestation effort needs to be planned and put into effect to provide habitats for our animals to survive, grow, and reproduce without human interference. We need to have sustainable and efficient food production methods and reduce meat consumption, leaving more land for ourselves and nature, as well as using less food and fresh water for meat production. Lastly, we need to give forests time and space to regrow by protecting the forests we have left and encouraging future forests to grow. It will take time, money, effort, and teamwork, but it's not only to ensure the safety of our planet, but our own, with humans single-handedly bringing our planet's extraordinary wildlife and ourselves to the brink of extinction in the coming years if we don't make a change.